presentation.
Welcome, you're watching Interface here on SABC 3. My name is Thembi Samachele, and the ANC is returning to Parliament with 62% of the vote, but will have 15 seats less in Parliament. The ruling party has assured South Africans that it will go back to the drawing board and improve service delivery. Head of the ANC's election campaign and Public Enterprises Minister Malusi Gigaba is our guest tonight on Interface. And as usual, we welcome all of your thoughts. If you want to join us on Facebook, it is Interface on SABC 3. If you want to find us on Twitter, you can also do so. It is Interface on SABC as well, and you can also find me and tweet me at Thembi Samachele. Let's get straight into it. Welcome, Minister. Thank you so much for coming through to talk to us.
It's our pleasure to be here.
Must start by saying congratulations to you. 11 million South Africans feeling that you can still run this country. So congratulations are in order.
And 400,000 on top of 11 million.
Okay, just over for 11 million then.
11.4 million.
We'll get it right, 11.4 million. So that means that at least some South Africans have the confidence in you. But do you think that's because South Africans feel that they lack an alternative, or because they think you're doing a good job?
They believe we are doing a good job. South Africans know the ANC. They've known it for 102 years. They have only known an ANC government since 1994 under the democratic dispensation. They know what we have done in the cause of the struggle. They know what we have done in the cause of democratizing South Africa. They trust the ANC. So the vote for the ANC is both a vote of loyalty as well as a vote of commitment and conviction about the future, because they believe that the ANC and South Africa's future are inseparable.
Before we look at what you're saying in light of the losses that you have made in certain parts of the country, let's look at some of the hotspots, or what's been called the hotspots. You've actually done well in areas like Bekkersdal, like Mothutlong. Why do you think people went back to vote for the ANC in areas where there was service delivery protests which said that they were not happy with the services you were delivering in those areas?
Remember that service delivery protests are not protests against the ANC. That's why they are not.
Government, though, which is led by the ANC.
They are not called anti-ANC protests. They are called service delivery protests. It's when people genuinely feel that there are services which they could get better or which they deserve but are not getting, and they expect that the ANC would respond to their needs. They trust the ANC to respond to those needs,
Minister,
and that's precisely why they vote for the ANC.
Let's look at that. Is that not semantics, though, because it is protest against the government led by the ANC?
No. It's protests about services, not against government, not against the ANC itself. That is why people go back to voting for the ANC after they protest, because they believe the ANC will listen to and respond to the issues which they are raising. We are a democratic society. Members of the ANC know the ANC, and people in South Africa know the ANC much better than many analysts tend to think they do. And that's why they go back to voting for the ANC. This happens in every election. It happens in every election, and each time it happens, it leaves the analysts and pundits astounded, when in actual fact, by now, we should all know that people distinguish between the performance of the ANC and their genuine concerns, which they raise often in the form of protests.
All right, let's look at the performance of the ANC then. 1994, 62.6% of the vote. 99, 66.4. 2004, 69.7. Come 2009, 65.9, and 2014, 62.6. So if you look at that, there was an increase all the way up to 2004, and then it started to decrease. So something is going wrong. Even though people love the ANC, as you say, people believe that you are doing a good job, there is something going wrong between 2004 and 2014.
In the first instance, let us reiterate our standpoint about this. The ANC has won 11.4 million votes. In 1994, we won 10 million votes. In 2014, we won 11.4 million out of 18 million votes that were cast in these elections. That means that 62% South Africans trust the ANC. Now, people having voted the ANC so overwhelmingly, when they were being told left, right, and center that they weren't going to, means that the ANC must not be an ungrateful and sour winner. We appreciate and are grateful for the vote we have received and are not going to sulk and mourn the other few percent that we didn't win. We must accept the verdict of South Africans on the basis of which we must move forward. We've been given an overwhelming mandate to govern South Africa, and that's precisely what we are going to do. But this also means that South Africans are not a static people. They think differently and behave differently at times. And as you could see, at a time when President Mandela was going to be president, we received 62%. And our votes increased with time and then also began dropping from 2009. It just says to the ANC that at each given time, we must be a bit more meticulous in terms of our mobilization. I don't want to preempt the reasons why the numbers have dropped, because we are still going to do a much more thorough going in-depth analysis of the election results. I would, however, suggest that probably we've had also a number of people who didn't participate in the election, and that's part of the issues that we need to address in order to ensure that the more numbers we have voting, the higher the ANC vote was going to be.
Minister, voter turnout has actually increased if you look at the numbers that the IEC has given us. But if you look at the ANC's performance, that 3% that you say you're not going to sulk about, considering that it is 15 seats that you've lost in Parliament, it wouldn't be sulking, it would actually be just reflecting on your performance. Do you not get worried as a party when you see that you have lost 15 seats and 3% of the vote?
Well, we didn't get worried when we increased our support in the previous years. We're not going to worry now.
But surely you would celebrate the support that's in.
We're not going to worry now that we've lost a few seats. We still have received an overwhelming mandate. With this overwhelming mandate, we can continue to implement each and every one of the commitments contained in the manifesto of the ANC without having to barter, to trade with, to enter into deals with the opposition for us to be able to implement our plans. We're going to implement our plans using our overwhelming mandate. I think what the ANC needs to do is to demonstrate greater courage in pursuing programs for radical economic transformation. This is the message that the people of South Africa have sent to the ANC. This is what we understand our mandate to be. And fortunately, we have an overwhelming mandate for us to do
be able to do that. And I want us to look at that and the performance of the opposition vis-a-vis how you've performed after the break. But just considering that COPE, you had 24 of their MPs defecting to the ANC. COPE has all but died in this election. They came out of the ANC, so you would assume that the ANC would grow if COPE dies. But that didn't happen.
Well, it didn't happen. As I say, we are still undertaking our own in-depth analysis and assessment of the election results, the voting patterns, what happened at VD by VD. And once we have done that and satisfied ourselves, we are going to arrive at conclusions about what we need to do in order to address some of those challenges. Okay. Obviously, we do need to look at all of those issues.
Sure. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. And of course, as usual, we welcome your thoughts on our interface on SABC3 page on Facebook, or you can find us on Twitter at Tembisa Machele. Stay with us. So, if you want to find us on Facebook, interface on SABC3, let's take some of your comments coming through on there. Nandi Zulu says the ANC should never mess with this second chance that we've given them. Be tough on crime and live according to the giver's principles. Batubili. And Nomangwane Chabalala says, I think the ANC should stop the in-house fighting and also separate itself from the unions. Elton Bajou says, for one, get rid of cadre deployment and employ qualified managers to run municipalities. Pumelele Falita says the ANC has drafted numerous policies but failed to implement them. Can the ANC please just implement the NDP? Jamal Mabaso says, can they promise that corruption will end and that there will be punishment for those who are corrupt? And Soso Zak says, I'm a teenager and I say the ANC must invest in us, and more so because, on the other hand, with things the way they are headed in South Africa, they need us. So some of the Facebook comments that we are able to take at this time, obviously we can't take all of them, and they've been coming in thick and fast, Minister. Some pro the ANC saying you are doing a good job, like you've said, but others also saying it's time to relook, and particularly relook what is happening at leadership level. So let's start with that. Let's look at Gauteng as a province. What happened in Gauteng? 52% of the vote, or just over 53. Let's get it correct. And in Johannesburg in particular, just over 52%, and in Tshwane, just over 50%. So things not going right in this province for the ANC. What went wrong?
Well, again, we must not be rushed into making guesstimations about what happened in the elections before we scientifically understand what went right and what went wrong. First and foremost, we ran a very huge and successful campaign, and we must acknowledge that. How we got the 62% that we got amidst all the opposition that we were facing, the odds that were stacked against us, that is also something we must put to a scientific assessment, much as the drop by 10% of the support of the ANC in Gauteng as a whole, but particularly in the metros. That also must be subjected to a scientific assessment for us to arrive at correct conclusions so that we can fix the problems that are there. I don't think, as I've been saying, I don't think that we should be so preoccupied with trying to steal the glory of the victory of the ANC away from it by focusing not on the fact that we have an overwhelming mandate to govern the whole country, and focus on the 1 or 2% that we lost during the elections. Because 11.4 million South Africans have given us their vote. I don't think they expect us to be worrying about how did we lose the other 1 or 2%. They want us to be worrying about how we are going to take South Africa forward.
But in Gauteng, it's a massive loss from 64% to 52%. It is a big loss.
It's a big loss, but I'm saying we still have the mandate to govern the province. Gauteng is not South Africa. I don't think we must be so obsessed about the drop of the ANC vote in Gauteng. Gauteng is not South Africa. Gauteng is in South Africa. It's our industrial hub. Yes, we would want to continue increasing, but we accept that there has been a 10% drop, and we're going to attend to that and address those challenges.
Are you going to have an endeavor in the province to look at what's gone wrong, particularly in the province, and also look at leadership issues?
We are going to have a national discussion. We are doing an assessment as the nation, as the national leadership of the ANC, to make that assessment. And I'm sure once we've done that, and parallel to it, the Gauteng leadership is probably doing their own, and we will share notes with them, we will compare notes, so that we are able to determine the commonalities and the areas that require intervention. Obviously, many members of the ANC have been raising their concerns, but I don't think that we need to focus ourselves that much on these issues other than the overwhelming mandate that we are facing, because where we are, we need to be forward-looking rather than licking our wounds, sulking and trying to find ghosts and witches amongst ourselves. We need to be forward-looking. South Africans expect that much of an organization to which they've invested 11.4 million of their votes.
Will that review include a review of the president's performance, particularly considering that the 2 terms, well, including this election now, the past 2 elections, you've actually lost votes under his leadership?
The elections are never about the president. We don't run presidential elections, we run party elections. It is the assessment of the ANC that we need to focus on, because if you were to do that and arrive at the wrong conclusion that the ANC vote has dropped in Gauteng because of the president, how do you attribute the ANC's increase in other provinces? So would not be attributable to him as well. But as I'm saying, the elections are never about individuals. In South Africa, they are about the party. It is the ANC that must do an introspection. But we do not want to be caught in a situation where instead of focusing on the mandate of the ANC, we are focusing on chasing witches and ghosts amongst ourselves. And one of the ladies who sent a message on Facebook puts it very clearly that issues of infighting and inward focus must come to an end. And that is the issue we raised before the elections when we were doing our own internal discussions, that South Africans must not think that the ANC is so inwardly focused that we have neglected their own interests. I think all of the messages...
Do you agree with that comment, though, that the infighting is largely responsible for some of the losses that you see?
No. Again, let's not be presumptuous. What she is saying could but be one of the reasons why we might have performed the way we did, but it's not the main reason. The ANC must do an objective scientific assessment of its performance for us to arrive at correct conclusions. Otherwise, we will end up concluding that the reason we performed the way we did was for reasons which are peripheral to what the South Africans were thinking as they went to cast their ballots. And that is why we must be patient and allow for that process to take place, for the cooling of the heads, for a scientific assessment, and then we know what is it that we need to do differently going forward. But the people who have sent the messages, I think that in the largest majority of cases, they've raised very pertinent issues we need to address.
That you will be looking at. All right, we continue this discussion with Minister Malusi Gigaba and also in his capacity as the head of the ANC's election campaign. As always, keep those thoughts coming. Interface on SABC3 on Facebook, also on Twitter at Interface on SABC or at Tembisa Magele. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are still talking to Minister Malusi Gigaba. And Minister, some of the issues raised on Facebook, the issues of corruption, and even corruption is a big issue before the election. Are you going to pay attention to that? And if so, are you going to be doing anything particularly specific to deal with that issue?
We actually have been paying very keen attention to issues of corruption, and that is why we have dedicated so much resources to establishing the institutions to combat corruption. We even ran a campaign on moral regeneration where we mobilize society, the religious community, civil society, labor, business and everybody to be part of this moral regeneration movement to try and deal with issues of corruption.
Are those working though? If
they are working.
To evaluate that.
They are working to the extent that more people report cases of corruption, more people are being prosecuted, more investigations are taking place, the institutions are solid enough and independent. I think that our campaign to pass corruption is working. I think South Africans are concerned about the fact that we continue having corruption, but South Africans must take heart on the fact that, you know, we are a country that's very transparent compared to many countries, including developed countries and more established democracies that sweep issues of corruption under the carpet. In South Africa, you can't sweep it under the carpet. We have greater transparency. Our institutions are working and transparent. The judicial system is independent and prosecutes people who are involved in corruption. And I think that we only can just continue increasing and intensifying our effort against corruption.
Minister, let's look at the performance of the opposition. Did you underestimate the EFF?
No, we didn't underestimate anybody. We just paid greater attention to the ANC. The ANC's campaign was never based on what any other political party is there in South Africa. You can establish 1 million of them if you want to, but the ANC focuses on its own campaign, and that's what we're interested in.
And the fact that they've picked up over 1 million votes, many of them, analysts say, coming from the ANC?
I don't care. We don't care where those votes are coming from. We don't care where they picked those votes from. What we care about is that the ANC, what we cared about was how the ANC was going to perform, and what we care about is that we have received an overwhelming mandate to govern this country, and that is what we are going to use to implement our manifesto.
Do you care that in Rustenburg you've lost from 73% of the votes in that area to 57%, many of them going to the EFF. Do you care about that?
We still have won Rustenburg, and that is what matters. We must not steal the glory of the victory of the ANC from it by attributing our victory to the losses of the opposition. The opposition has collectively lost this election. Together they have 38% of the South African vote. The ANC singularly has 11.4 million, 62% of the South African vote.
But collectively that opposition has got more than in the last election. So they are edging forward. So you have to pay attention to what they're doing.
No. South Africans don't vote the ANC in order that we pay attention to the opposition. South Africans vote the ANC in order that we implement our manifesto. That is what we are focusing on, not the opposition. We cannot be looking behind our backs at our shadows when the responsibility we have been given is to govern the country. We must exercise the responsibility we've been given, because 5 years is not too long a period of time.
Just on that vein, Minister, you've said that you feel that this is also a victory against what the media has campaigned against the ANC. Is that really the way to look at it, though? Because the media is just doing its job.
The media is doing its job. We also have an opinion. We have a right to express an opinion on the behavior of the media. The South African media are overly sensitive.
Yeah.
They do not want to be criticized. They want to have a leeway to do anything they want without us having to say, we don't agree with you. We think that you've overstepped your bounds, you've overstretched your hand in this instance.
And in this instance,
we believe in this instance, they went out of what is acceptable in a democracy to deliberately distort information about the last 20 years, to deliberately decampaign the ANC. And that is why members of the ANC feel this sense that in winning these elections, they've also won against the media. But we never relied on our campaign on the media. We relied on the volunteers of the ANC. The overwhelming victory of the ANC owes to our volunteers more than anybody else.
Just getting back to that opposition performance, 22 more seats in Parliament for the Democratic Alliance. That should worry you a bit.
It allows them to do nothing than to have more say. That's all that they're going to do. We govern the country. It is the manifesto of the ANC that will be implemented. We have an overwhelming mandate to govern South Africa, and that is what matters.
They've got more of a base to work from, though, for the 2016 and 2019 elections. They could actually eat into your support.
The ANC remains with over 500 full-time cadres who are its members of parliament and the provincial legislatures, who are going to do the work of the ANC on the ground. Remember, they were here in 1994. They had 38% of the vote in 1994 again. They lost it in 1999, they lost it in 2004, and the same thing could still repeat itself. So nobody says that the gains which have been made by the opposition have now become permanent. There are many people who wished that the ANC was going to lose these elections. We were being told that national liberation movements lose elections after 20 years. The ANC has emerged with an overwhelming majority. There are many countries in our own region in Africa, to use them just as an example, where their support, the national liberation movements dropped, and then they also picked up. They've been in power for longer than 30 years.
And in fact, so that thread actually leads to the formation of a Labour Party. Do you think that could happen here?
No, it's not going to happen here, because the relations between the ANC and COSATU remain very solid. People have tried to establish. NUMSA is not COSATU. It's just an affiliate of COSATU. But not all NUMSA members are homogeneous. We must not mistaken the lunacy of the leadership of NUMSA with the thinking of the membership of NUMSA. Members of NUMSA have got their own opinions. They are members of the ANC in their own name and right. And so they must not be mistaken for sheepishly following their leadership, no matter where their leadership is misleading them.
All right, Minister, we're running out of time. Just a quick one on young people. Do you think that the ANC didn't pay enough attention to young people, because also the opposition has picked up a lot of youth votes?
The ANC remains dominant amongst the youth, and I think that the campaigning itself and the voting patterns would demonstrate that. The opposition might have picked up many votes amongst young people, but again, the ANC remained dominant amongst young people. It's consistent with the trends.
And we've gotta wrap it up. But what are you doing? What are you doing with Cape Town and the Western Cape? You've consistently lost that province. What are you doing to gain that back?
Oh no! Remember, we won we became the largest minority. We became the largest party in the Western Cape in 1999.
Yes.
And we won the province in 2004. We lost it in 2009 because of infighting.
And you've lost it again this
And we've
time.
lost it again. So we can't say that we've consistently been losing the Western Cape. If the people of the Western Cape have voted for the ANC before and trusted it with their vote, they can still do it. We are going to continue doing our work there. We increased our votes in these elections, and we believe that is the basis for us to continue working towards winning the Western Cape back into the fold of the ANC.
We have got to leave it there. Thank you so much for coming through to talk to us. Minister Malusi Gigaba, head of the ANC's election campaign. And remember that we do continue the conversation on our Facebook page, Interface on SABC3, or on Twitter, @Interface on SABC, or @Tembisa Magele. Good night.